2,400 years ago, one man sat down and wrote about a mighty empire that sank beneath the ocean in a single day and a single night. No ruins, no reiki, no proof it ever existed. And yet we have been searching for it ever since. Its name is Atlantis, a golden island city, richer and more powerful than any nation on Earth, swallowed whole by the sea. For 2,000 years, people have asked the same question. Was it the greatest lost civilization in history, or the most brilliant lie ever told? In the next few minutes, you'll find out exactly where this story came from, the strange real places people swear are hiding it, an island of blonde, blue-eyed people who built pyramids off the coast of Africa, and finally, the twist almost nobody talks about. Because Atlantis may have been real after all, just not in the way you think. To understand the legend, you have to go back to the man who invented the word. Not a sailor, not an explorer, a philosopher in the marble city of Athens, around 360 years before Christ. His name was Plato, and he is one of the most important thinkers who ever lived. And in two of his books, called Timaeus and Critias, he tells a story unlike anything else he ever wrote. He insists, again and again, that this story is true. According to Plato, the tale did not begin with him. It had traveled a very long way to reach his pen, passed down for 200 years before anyone in Athens ever heard it. It started, he says, with another famous Greek, a lawmaker named Solon. Solon traveled to Egypt, to an ancient temple in a city called Sais. And there, the Egyptian priests told him something that stopped him cold. Solon, one old priest said, "You Greeks are children. You remember nothing." The priests claimed their records went back thousands of years, and in those records was a war and a kingdom that the Greeks had completely forgotten. 9,000 years before Solon's time, they said there was an island. It sat in the ocean beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, out in the open Atlantic. And that island was larger than Libya and Asia combined. On it stood a civilization of breathtaking power. Its kings ruled not just their own island, but stretched their empire across the sea, swallowing lands in every direction. They called it the realm of Atlas, Atlantis. And here's the detail that makes it unforgettable. Plato didn't just say it was big. He described its capital, stone by stone, as if he had walked its streets himself. At the center of the island, he wrote, stood a low hill, and on that hill a temple. Around it, the god of the sea, Poseidon, carved rings, alternating circles of land and water, one inside the other, like a target drawn on the earth. 3 great rings of water, 2 of land, all perfectly round, as if shaped by something more than human hands. To cross from the sea to the central island, you had to pass bridge after bridge, gate after gate. They dug a canal straight to the ocean, wide enough and deep enough for the largest ships. Warships lay waiting in hidden docks carved into the rock. From the outside, you would never guess how many. The Atlanteans covered their walls in metal, the outer wall in bronze, the next in tin, and the wall around the very center, Plato says, flashed with a red light, coated in a mysterious metal the ancients called orichalcum, a substance, he wrote, that is now known only by name. At the heart of it all rose the temple of Poseidon, plated in silver, its pinnacles in gold. Inside stood a statue of the god, so tall its head brushed the roof, riding a chariot pulled by 6 winged horses. There were hot springs and cold springs, lush gardens, racetracks, a harbor roaring with merchants from every corner of the world. And roaming the island, Plato insists, were herds of elephants. The land gave 2 harvests a year. The mountains sheltered rich villages. It was, by every description, a paradise. And for a long time, its people were noble, wise, and good. But that is exactly where the story turns. Because power like that rarely stays humble. Over the generations, Plato says the divine blood in the Atlanteans grew thin. Greed crept in, arrogance. They were no longer content to rule their own paradise. They wanted the world. Atlantis raised a colossal army and swept eastward across the Mediterranean, conquering everything in its path. City after city fell. Nation after nation bowed. and it seemed nothing on earth could stop them. Nothing except one city. According to Plato, a small, disciplined people stood alone against the entire Atlantean Empire. And that people, in his story, were the ancient Athenians, the ancestors of his own city. Against impossible odds, they held the line. They broke the invasion, freed the conquered lands, and drove Atlantis back into the sea. It should have been the greatest victory in Greek history. And then the world ended. There occurred, Plato writes, violent earthquakes and floods. And in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared into the depths of the sea. Not over centuries, not over years. In one day and one night, an empire larger than 2 continents was simply gone, dragged beneath the waves, leaving nothing behind but impassable mud where the ocean once opened wide. It is one of the most haunting endings ever written. And here is the strangest part of all. Plato never finished it. In the middle of the second book, right as the god Zeus gathers the other gods to pass judgment on the fallen Atlanteans, the text simply stops, mid-sentence, as if the author put down his pen and walked away forever. Why? Nobody knows. And that silence has driven people mad for 2,000 years. Because it leaves us with the only question that matters. Did Plato make the whole thing up? For most historians, the answer is yes, and the reasons are strong. Start with Plato's own student, a young man named Aristotle. He would become one of the greatest minds in history, and he flatly did not buy it. Aristotle's verdict was sharp. The man who invented Atlantis, he said, is the same man who sank it. In other words, Plato built the island only so he could destroy it, to make a point. And what a point it was. Look again at the story. A proud, powerful, wealthy empire, drunk on its own strength, tries to conquer the world and is annihilated. It is a warning, a parable about arrogance, wrapped in the disguise of history. Plato loved doing exactly this. Throughout his work, he invents vivid stories, myths, and characters to teach a deeper truth. To many scholars, there's another clue too. In Plato's story, the noble hero that defeats Atlantis is, conveniently, an idealized version of Athens itself. It's the perfect flattering mirror. Real history is rarely so neat. So case closed? A brilliant fable, nothing more? For a long time, that was the accepted answer. But then people started noticing things that a simple fairy tale should not contain. Because Plato didn't describe a vague, magical kingdom in the clouds. He gave numbers, distances, directions, the size of canals, the temperature of springs, the layout of a harbor. Why would a man inventing a fable bother with engineering? And so the search began. If even a piece of it were real, where on earth could Atlantis actually be? The hunt would send explorers to the bottom of oceans, into deserts, and to the edges of the map. Let's follow them. Our first stop is the most respected theory of all, and it doesn't require the Atlantic at all. It sits in the Mediterranean, on a small, curved island you may already know. Santorini. Today's Santorini is a postcard. White houses on black cliffs above a blue lagoon. But those cliffs are the walls of a wound. Santorini is what's left of a volcano that suffered one of the most violent eruptions in human history. Around 1600 years before Christ, the volcano, then called Thera, detonated. It blew the center out of the island and swallowed it into the sea, leaving behind the ring-shaped lagoon we see today. Rings of land around a drowned center. Sound familiar? And here's what makes it chilling. Just south of Thera lived one of the most advanced civilizations of the ancient world. The Minoans on the island of Crete. Elegant palaces, running water, a powerful navy, art centuries ahead of its time. The eruption of Thera hurled tsunamis across the sea and buried a nearby Minoan town called Akrotiri under meters of ash, freezing it in time like a Bronze Age Pompeii. The Minoan world went into a decline it never recovered from. A brilliant sea power, advanced beyond its neighbors, struck down by a natural catastrophe erupting from the sea. To many researchers, the Minoans are the real memory behind Atlantis, a true story that grew and drifted over 1,000 years until it landed in Plato's hands. It's a beautiful theory, but it has a problem, and it's a big one. Plato was very specific. Atlantis, he said, lay beyond the pillars of Heracles, out in the Atlantic. Santorini is nowhere near it. So other hunters looked exactly where Plato pointed, and what they found is stranger still. Deep in the Sahara Desert, in the nation of Mauritania, there's a formation so vast you can only truly see it from space. Astronauts named it the Eye of the Sahara. Geologists call it the Richat structure. It is a series of concentric rings, one inside the other, stretching almost 30 miles across. From orbit, it looks less like nature and more like a bullseye stamped into the Earth. And to a certain group of researchers, it looks like something else entirely. A city built in rings. They point to eye-opening coincidences. The rings, the dimensions, which some claim match Plato's numbers. Signs that water once flowed here when the Sahara was green. Even mountains to the north and an opening toward the sea, just as Plato described. Mainstream geologists have a calmer explanation. The Richat structure, they say, is a giant dome of rock, pushed up and then eroded over millions of years into rings. Not a city, not man-made, just the slow artistry of wind and stone. Still, staring into that eye in the desert, it's hard not to wonder. And the wondering didn't stop there. In 1968, off the coast of the Bahamas, near the island of Bimini, divers found something on the seabed that made headlines around the world. A long line of massive, flat stone blocks, laid out in a neat row beneath the water, like a road or the foundation of a wall. They called it the Bimini Road, and to believers, it was the smoking gun, the doorstep of Atlantis at last. Geologists studied the stones and delivered a disappointing verdict. It was a natural rock formation, beach rock that cracks into neat blocks all on its own. But the legend of the Bimini Road refuses to die, and divers still return to it, hoping. Others placed Atlantis in the Azores, mid-Atlantic mountaintops that could be the peaks of sunken land, or on a shallow underwater bank called Spartel, right at the mouth of the Mediterranean, exactly where Plato's island should be. Everywhere people looked, they found a maybe. Nowhere did they find a yes. But there's one place on Earth stranger than all the rest. A cluster of real islands, off the coast of Africa, home to a people so mysterious that for centuries, some were convinced they had found the last survivors of Atlantis itself. They're called the Canary Islands, 7 volcanic islands in the Atlantic, just west of the Sahara. And when European sailors arrived here in the Middle Ages, they did not find empty rocks. They found a people already living there, the Guanches. And the Guanches made no sense. They lived on islands, surrounded by ocean, yet they had no boats. They did not sail. They could not even travel between their own islands. It was as if they had always been there, marooned, since the beginning of time. Even stranger was how some of them looked. Among a people off the coast of Africa, early accounts described tall figures, some with fair skin, light hair, even blue eyes. To European visitors, they looked like the ghosts of a lost northern race, stranded on the edge of the sea. And then there were their dead. The Guanches mummified their bodies, wrapping them in hides and hiding them in mountain caves, preserved for centuries. It was a practice that instantly reminded outsiders of one place above all: ancient Egypt. On the island of Tenerife stand strange stepped structures of black stone, arranged with their corners aligned to the sunrise. Some have compared them to the step pyramids of Egypt and Mexico and asked the obvious question: how did the same idea appear on 3 separate continents? Put it all together. Isolated islanders who couldn't sail. Fair-haired people on the doorstep of Africa. Mummies. Pyramids. Mountains rising straight out of the Atlantic, near the exact spot Plato described. To some, the conclusion was irresistible. The Canary Islands, they argued, were the mountaintops of Atlantis, the highest peaks of a sunken continent, still poking above the waves. And the Guanches were its final survivors, clinging to the summits after their world went under. It is a spectacular idea, and modern science tells a quieter, but no less fascinating, truth. Studies of Guanche remains and DNA point not to a lost continent, but to North Africa. The Guanches were most likely Berbers, who reached the islands thousands of years ago, and then, over time, lost the art of sailing that brought them there. The pyramids, too, may be far younger than they look, possibly built from cleared farming stones in recent centuries. The mystery has an earthly answer, and yet the Guanches remain haunting, a people who vanished into history, conquered and absorbed, leaving behind mummies, riddles, and a whistled language still echoing in the hills. So if Atlantis wasn't in the Canaries, or the desert, or the Bahamas, then where did Plato really get it? To answer that, we don't need to find a lost continent. We just need to look at the world Plato actually lived in, because his world was drowning. The ancient Mediterranean was a land of earthquakes, tsunamis, and vanishing coastlines. Plato and every Greek of his age grew up on true stories of the sea rising up and erasing towns from the map in a single night. He didn't have to imagine the ocean swallowing a city. He had witnesses. Some think older memories fed the legend too. The eruption of Thera, perhaps even the distant flooding of the Black Sea, when the Mediterranean is thought to have burst through and drowned an entire inhabited plain. Buried deep in human memory sat a terror as old as civilization. The sea can take everything back. But the single most convincing source is also the most overlooked. And it happened not thousands of years before Plato, but during his own lifetime, close enough to touch. On the southern shore of the Gulf of Corinth stood a thriving Greek city called Helike. It was proud, wealthy, and important, a regional power with its own famous temple. And then, one winter night in 373 years before Christ, it ceased to exist. Survivors described the horror. First the ground shook. Then, in the dead of night, a great wave rose out of the sea and rolled over the city. By morning, Helike was gone, sunk beneath the waters of the Gulf, its people lost. An entire city swallowed in a single night. Plato was a grown man when it happened. It was the talk of the Greek world. For generations afterward, travelers sailed over the site and claimed they could still see the drowned ruins and a bronze statue standing beneath the surface, staring up through the water. Read that again. A real, proud Greek city, destroyed by an earthquake and a wave, sinking beneath the water in a single night, within Plato's own lifetime. If you were a philosopher searching for the perfect image of a civilization erased by the sea, you would not have to invent one. You would only have to remember. And here is the final chill. For over 2,000 years, Helike itself was treated as half a myth, a story with no proof. Until, in the early 2000s, archaeologists searching the coastal plain finally found it. Walls, streets, coins, a real lost city pulled back from the legend, exactly where the ancients said it drowned. Which leaves us with a haunting possibility. Atlantis, the empire that never existed, may have been built out of the bones of cities that truly did. A memory of Thera, of Helike, of every town the sea had ever taken, fused into one unforgettable warning. And maybe that is the real secret of Atlantis. We keep searching the oceans for it, scanning the seabed, flying over deserts because we want it to be a place. But Plato never really lost a continent. He lost an argument to time and turned it into the most powerful story he could. A story about pride, about a civilization so certain of its own greatness that it believed it could conquer the world, right up until the moment the world took it back. Sound like anyone you know? That's why Atlantis never truly sank. Every age looks into that drowned city and sees its own reflection, its own power, its own fragility, its own quiet fear that everything we build could vanish in a single day and a single night. Whether it was Minoan Crete, an eye in the desert, or a philosopher's perfect lie, one thing is certain. 2,400 years later, we are still standing on the shore, staring out at the water, waiting for a lost world to rise. If you enjoyed hunting for a lost world with me, subscribe. Every week we take one great mystery and pull it apart, piece by piece, until the truth surfaces. Your next impossible story is one click away.